Welcome to Farm Year Daily, a field forward podcast. I'm David Geiger. Today on Farm Year Daily, we're going to get a soybean perspective on the One Big Beautiful Bill with Katie Hall. Then we'll jump over to Western Iowa to check out crop conditions in the area of agronomist Mike Witt. Please be sure to like and follow the podcast as well as our social media at Field Forward Pod. We would love to have you join our community, keeping folks informed about what is affecting our farmers. This is Farm Year Daily. And joining me on Farm Here Daily, we have the Iowa Soybean Association Senior Director of Advocacy, Katie Hall, with us. Katie, thank you so much for being here on Farm Here Daily. And we're going to talk about the One Big Beautiful Bill that passed earlier this week and what it means for Iowa's soybean farmers. So first off, thanks for joining us. And tell us some of the highlights that you saw when you were looking at the passage of this act.
David, thanks so much for having me. I want to just touch on some high-level wins for farmers and especially Iowa soybean farmers. The One Big Beautiful Bill strengthens Section 45Z, and that's our clean fuel production credit. It also increased the small biodiesel producer credit. We saw an additional 10 cents for the first 15 million gallons on those small biodiesel producers. We also saw some strengthening and long-term stability and permanent tax relief for farmers. So whether that was the estate tax exemption at $15 million per individual or $30 million per couple. We also saw Section 199A made permanent, that pass-through deduction that cooperatives get to utilize. And then also boosting reference price to $10 a bushel for soybeans. That was really important. We also saw changes to beginning farmer and rancher benefits. And so that access to credit and that support is crucial for those new and beginning farmers. Doubled funding for the market access program and foreign market development, or MAP and FMD. And so that was really wonderful to see. Funding went from $235 million to an additional $280 million. So slightly more than doubled, but those dollars are really impactful to growth and opportunities for our farmers, but for U.S. ag, especially as, the world is still developing and some of those markets are coming online for things like soybean meal.
So a lot of important topics for farmers. I heard tax credits, biodiesel specifically. We have the safety net, foreign market access programs, and of course, within some of the safety net stuff as well, some reference price changes. Let's dive right into the biodiesel side because I want to emphasize biodiesel production in Iowa. First off, what is the impact of Iowa biodiesel? And secondly, what specifically about this tax credit will be for our Iowa producers here?
Yeah, great question. Biodiesel is really important to the soybean markets. It accounts for 10% of the per bushel price of U.S. soybeans. But as we drill down a little further on that, for Iowa farmers, the biodiesel industry supported $1 per bushel in 2024. So that's a total of $598 million in overall value. In Iowa, we have a mix of biodiesel producers. We have some larger sites and we have some smaller sites. It's obviously, Iowa's the number one value added ag state for soybeans specifically, and a large part of that is the biodiesel market. We'll see additional support for those smaller folks. An additional 10 cents on 15 million gallons is notable. And we've seen some pauses or slowdowns in the industry. So this is just a nod to say we still believe that U.S. produced biodiesel is the way forward, and we're happy to be part of that.
As we also look at tax provisions and safety net programs, I think a question to ask, and this is specifically when I talk about some of the reference prices when it comes to $10 soybeans, and the updated ARC PLC numbers. Is that enough? And have we had enough work done for our farmers in the tough economic challenges they're facing?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question. I think there's a lot to be determined, right? we're really in a space where we've seen a lot of progress forward in these programs. And so I think farmers are really ready to say, okay, what does this actually look like on paper? And of course, each operation is highly individualized, which programs they utilize. There's a bit of a transition period too to understand what implementation actually looks like. So I know in this crop year, we'll have a little bit more grace and as farmers be able to choose which program fits us better by analyzing both. And sometimes we don't have that insight. And so just appreciate that thought process as the legislature came together to figure out, what's the best step forward. Knowing that we have this time of transition, I think we've got a lot of opportunity to really analyze and say, was this enough moving forward? I studied economics at Iowa State, and so it makes me think of one of my professors saying something to the extent of, the world is one big if-then statement. And I feel that way very much in farming. So we have so many moving parts and pieces that, when it all moves at the same time, there has to be some sort of settling to really understand what that looks like in reality. And so, I think this is a great tee up too for our continuing conversations on the Farm Bill. And things that need to be changed there. Obviously, reconciliation and through the bird bath process in the Senate, there were some provisions that were eliminated or modified beyond what the original thoughts were on what they wanted to accomplish. And so, some of those things weren't eligible to be changed in a reconciliation bill. So, ultimately, we've heard that the point and purpose was, hey, if we're expanding programs, this is the place to do it. And then through the Farm Bill, we have some opportunities then to fix other parameters. I thought it was fascinating that G.T. Thompson called out Prop 12 and, California's connection to hog production as a possible fix in a skinny Farm Bill. And also pesticide labeling. These are a couple of issues that impact Iowa significantly and our farmers. One provision that hit the bird bath was the Bio Preferred program. And that's really been helpful for soybean markets. It's building those bio-based market opportunities for Iowa, but also for the U.S. And I know there's some opportunity to work on conservation programs. There's an opportunity to focus on some enhanced air and water quality, but also overall the goal of conservation, right, is fostering resilient, productive soils. And so we do have some opportunities to move that forward. Some of those conservation programs were authorized through 2031. So that's beneficial. That eases up some of we must get a Farm Bill in 2025. But I would say overall, the sentiment is still that there needs to be some version of a Farm Bill. I think there's some general fatigue right now with legislators because the one big beautiful bill had, the voter-rama and so many amendments. And there's so much discussion around, if we take this piece out and we put this piece in, what does the total look like? And so I do see them wading into this Farm Bill, with some caution about how they're going to do that effectively. And, try to do it in a bipartisan way. I know that, SNAP and Farm Bill generally work hand in hand. And so they'll have to continue those conversations and sorting out really what the best path forward is.
I would like to touch on MAP and FMD, the Market Access Program and the Foreign Market Development programs that are within the One Big Beautiful Bill, because now it's about $500 million in supporting those programs. Why is that important for our soybean farmers?
Oh, it's huge. I think the first time I was in DC with the Iowa Soybean Association, this was one of our key talking points. These programs really have been proven to support, just exactly as they're called, market access and foreign market developments. it's created opportunities for soybean demand, soybean meal demand. And, it's an easy program to point at and say, this has been successful. We can't continue to fund it at the same levels that we have for the last 10, 15, 20 years. And if we're talking about, in an environment where the US has a trade deficit, how do we export more soybean meal, for instance? And this is a great way to do that, fund those programs and create more opportunities. So Iowa is going to have quite a bit of soybean meal on hand, and we're going to be seeking new solutions for getting that protein to places where they are protein deficient, because the world as a whole is protein deficient. And so we just have to sort out the best way to do that and what those new market opportunities are. I really think that there's an opportunity to think differently about aquaculture. This is a really highly individualized space where, at different stages of life, different types of fish have different dietary requirements. But because, the world is seeking protein options, low cost, consistent, high quality, that is really a space where Iowa soybeans fit in well.
The reason why I asked that question before talking about the Farm Bill is because you just emphasized the importance of foreign markets to our farmers here. And farmers have faced some pretty tumultuous economic conditions, especially with constant tariff threats or revocation of tariff threats. And this back and forth has definitely been helped by the One Big Beautiful Bill, which raised those reference prices. But there is always more work to do. And I don't think it's very cold to say, because I think farmers are the first ones to understand the idea that there's always work to be done.
Yeah.
You can't rest on your laurels. If you don't do stuff now, then come planting or harvest time, you're not going to have the time to do it all. And so the politicians that are in Washington, D.C. are there to try to get stuff done and try to get work done. And you can't just say the One Big Beautiful Bill helps farmers enough, because we still do not have a farm bill after almost 7 years. And that's super important for you guys and for our farmers across the country. So with that in mind, why and what are we needing for this skinny farm bill that it's kind of been coined?
Oh, that's a great call out. I think we're really in a space where we have to be so grateful and so thankful for what One Big Beautiful Bill has brought forward, but knowing that, this is just part of the discussion. We have other issues on our plate that, really just won't go away before September. And so, key asks there really are a hard look at Prop 12. The swine industry is a huge partner to soybeans, to our soybean meal partners. Does California have the authority to dictate hog production in the nation, right? Secondarily, that pesticide labeling loophole is what I like to call it. But we have manufacturers that are meeting EPA standards, labeling pesticides as they should, and then we have lawsuits coming through states that are saying that those manufacturers are failing to warn consumers, failing to warn users that these are harmful chemicals, and we just don't have the data and science that say that. And so, I think these are prime opportunities to fix and resolve a couple of those key issues where you wouldn't generally say, oh, this fits under Title I or Title II. This is, connected to commodities, or this is connected to conservation, or whichever program it might be. We do have the opportunity really to put in some fixes that make a big difference to agriculture, to the future of agriculture. This bio-preferred program that I referenced, that's really an opportunity for us to continue to invest in innovation, to invest in new market opportunities, and to think a little differently about how we make, consume, and utilize some of the best crops that are grown anywhere in the world right here in the U.S.
Katie Hall is the Senior Director of Advocacy for the Iowa Soybean Association. Katie, thank you so much for joining us and talking about the One Big Beautiful Bill Act and the Farm Bill in the future here on Farm Here Daily.
Thank you, David.
We appreciate it. This is Farm Here Daily. We will have more conversations on the way, but first let's take a look at the marketplace. And it looks like there was green on the board at the end of Thursday's trading session. September corn is unchanged, $3.99 with December rising a penny at $4.16. Soybeans in August 3.5 cents higher at $10.12, with September rising 4.75 at $10.02. Soybean meal in August $2 a ton in the green at $271.40. Wheat in September 7.5 cents more at $5.54.5, with December rising 7.75 at $5.75 even. In the livestock market, close for Thursday, a more mixed trade there. August live cattle down 55 cents, a hundredweight at $219.22, with October falling 27 cents to $217.07. Feeder cattle in August 80 cents, a hundredweight higher at $321.27, with September $1.20 up at $321.22. Lean hogs in August down $1 at $106.22, with October falling $1.50 at $92.27 a hundredweight. That is the Thursday market close. This is Farm Here Daily. And joining me on Farm Here Daily, I have Mike Witt, ISU Extension agronomist for Western Iowa. Mike, glad to have you on the program. It's been about a month since we last chatted, and I wanted to see the state of what is going on over in Western Iowa. Is everything going well over there?
Well, I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but a lot of times when I'm looking at the fields out here right now in West Central Iowa, the corn is looking, we'll call it sneaky good. We haven't had a lot of moisture over the last couple years, so sometimes we forget just how good corn can look when we get some adequate moisture and things like that going on across the area. So crops are actually looking fairly good right now across the region.
I like that, sneaky good. It's not quite a full commitment towards good. Now, granted, I will say the Iowa Crop Progress Report is putting conditions at pretty high levels of good to excellent. I think it was like 86% last time I saw.
Yeah, that's correct. So that's, again, there are a lot of fields that are looking really, really good across the area. And when we get fields that are looking really good, then we get people who sometimes will make management decisions based on trying to keep a good crop and keep it going instead of doing a management decision that might be more economically sound going on in there. And having lived in Iowa my whole life, I may hedge a little bit on saying, today it looks sneaky good. I know what Mother Nature can do to us pretty quick. So things can make some adjustments real fast out there across the area.
What are some of the calls you've been getting from the farmers in your area about things they're really watching out for in terms of pest pressure or maybe moisture?
Yes, we'll start with pest pressure. So what I'm really hearing from farmers out in the area about pest pressure is a couple different things. For corn, we're really starting to hear about the corn rootworms and those adults coming in and starting to wreak havoc because we are getting to that tasseling stage. We are right on the front end of that. So we've got tassel and ear development going on out there across the area. So with that, we're starting to really start to see those corn rootworm adults are going to start taking shape and doing a lot more damage moving forward. So people are on the front end of that asking about, hey, should we spray insecticides? Is that something to look at? And what I would say to that is make sure to check your trait package that you put out there. If you have fields that are corn on corns, scout those fields. Don't just go apply. Make sure that we're seeing out there the actual insect pressure for that. For soybeans, there's really two main insects that I'm hearing a lot about. I'm hearing a lot about some soybean gall midge out there across the area. They are coming in on the edges of fields. Those individuals who have those, again, will know that they have those out there and they've done some scouting because they don't move a whole lot and they like to jump across roads or they'll jump across waterways. So they probably at this point have an idea of the areas where they're at. So they're working on some management for that. And then if we want to talk the other insect that's really starting to hit hard, that would be the Japanese beetle. And that is one that goes across all agriculture and lawns and gardens and everywhere and is the pest friend that nobody really likes when it comes to that. So that would be kind of where we're looking at as far as pests go. So far as moisture and some of those, really the growth and development has been very, very rapid out there. So with that, again, we're getting to about that tasseling stage across the area. Soybeans, again, we're getting into some of that flowering and pod development area. So soybeans, we really don't have a lot of the, shall we say, yield made yet. That could be going a little bit more into August and September, so we're a little bit early for that. But the stature of the beans, because they got a little bit of a late start this year and we're growing slow, is a little bit small. So some people might say, well, that's going to hurt yield, but from what I've seen over the years, short beans can yield just as well as tall beans can. So we're looking okay in that. Now with corn, again, the biggest questions that I'm getting right now circle around fungicides. And to me, when thinking about corn fungicides and thinking about, do I want to make that application? Again, you really need to look at the timing of that application. And what I mean by that is fungicides only have a certain amount of time that they are effective, whether that's 10 days, 24 days, somewhere in there, plus or minus some. And a lot of that depends on what you make as a decision. Well, if you put that on the field and if you put it on too early and you run out of that effectiveness before disease comes in, that fungicide is not going to be effective. So scout your fields, make sure that if you see diseases coming in, whether that would be a tar spot, we have seen some reports of northern leaf blight coming in this year. If you've seen either of those or gray leaf spot, make sure that that disease is coming in, it's starting to get into your field, then put the fungicide on, because if you go out and do it way too early, you might not be able to have enough effectiveness to stretch throughout the season.
Mike, when it comes to disease pressure, are we facing good disease conditions at the moment? Because while June was wetter than usual, it was also a lot warmer than usual.
So you are right that certain diseases do like warmer, wetter conditions. Others prefer drier conditions. So what that would be is, yes, I would say as we have more moisture, we are going to be prone probably to more of that leaf wetness. So a lot of those spores, whether they're on the ground and they splash up or they're ones that get carried by the air, there is going to be a lot more of that out there in the field. So I would say right now, if we're looking at disease, there is a potential for higher pressure, but again, it depends on what field you're at. And also, I would be remiss if I didn't say that the hybrids that you have selected can make a large difference over some of that disease that you have. If you have ones that are very resistant to, say, northern leaf blight, then you might not see that out in your field, and using that resistance is a great tool to help you not have to spend money on a fungicide.
I want to jump back real quick to what you were talking about, insect pressure, because I was curious if you've seen much success recently, especially during the earlier stages, of a more targeted approach to pesticides, maybe using drones, or if they are like the soybean gall midge on the edges of fields, kind of just getting those edges. Have you seen much success there?
What I have seen, especially we'll take the soybean gall midge with that, I have seen that there is some effectiveness that can be done in a spray around the outside of the field. Now, with that effectiveness, are you going to get a sum of zero? Are you going to be able to get rid of all of the gall midge? The answer to that is no. But if you have larger populations, I have seen some effectiveness of insecticides spraying around the outside of those fields for that particular pest. Now, what individual type of insecticide? That doesn't matter as much. Most of them can be effective on the gall midge. It's just a matter of getting them on there, and as that pest keeps emerging throughout the season, it's about getting as much as you can when you can for those things, knowing you might have to do, again, some of the economics of that, of how many times would we need to do some of those applications. When it comes to drones are kind of the new kid on the block, I would say, or newer kid on the block when it comes to some of those applications. And they can do really well with targeted applications of either a herbicide, or if it's labeled, or a insecticide out there in the fields, especially with herbicides and insecticides. If we have a drowned out spot or places like that where you don't want to necessarily go in across the whole field, but you have a smaller area you might want to do an application for, that's really where they shine. Getting them on a full field sized basis, I don't know if that's really as effective necessarily as some other methodologies that we have, but that doesn't mean in the future it won't be something that is going to be very, very prevalent across the area.
Mike Witt is the Western Iowa Extension agronomist for ISU Extension. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us and talk about what's going on in your part of the state on Farm Here Daily.
Thank you.
This is Farm Here Daily, a Field Forward podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Again, in order to continue to produce this type of local content, we would love to have you join our community. So please follow the podcast and check out our social media channels at Field Forward Pod. You can also find me on social media at Geiger Reports, as well as WHO TV Channel 13 every weekday in their morning and noon hour programs. Again, I am your host, David Geiger, and I'll be back again tomorrow, everybody.